Our company, ComforCare Home Care, is a company that provides in-home care. We're a licensed agency in the state of North Carolina that provides in-home care for seniors or anybody for that age, anywhere from what we call pediatrics or children all the way up to seniors. But most of our clientele are of the senior community, and it could be anybody living in a private residence or retirement community or people that are in facilities. I mean, every month we have sitters that go into hospitals. We have CNAs and caregivers, home health aides, that go into retirement centers and provide help and extra assistance for those retirees that need a little bit extra help sometimes in their private residence. Again, it could be a private home or a retirement community. And we do a lot of it. We have about a couple hundred caregivers that are in our database that provide that care or have access to provide the care throughout the greater Charlotte metro market.
Well, again, I'm in a situation where I have a family member, my mother, who is still able to be independent, has her own place, but I know that she's getting more feeble, more needing services.
Right.
And so, but I want her to stay independent as long as possible.
Right.
So I guess we're starting to think, and I guess for the people that are watching our show, they're wanting to stay independent as well. So again, what are some of the things? I know there's a difference between home health care and just home care or other services. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about what's different about?
Sure. Yeah.
Those things?
Yeah, there is a difference between home health care and home care. So let's say somebody was in the hospital and they get discharged, or they go. Oftentimes now they're being discharged from a hospital and then move over to what we call a rehab center, skilled nursing / rehab center. So they're either discharged, go home immediately from a hospital, or get discharged from the hospital, go to the rehab center, and then go home. Either way, they eventually wind up back at the house or a retirement center. Well, we provide care that is what they call non-skilled in nature. Now, the skilled side of it is what they call home health care. Now, home health care would be LPNs, RNs, and therapists primarily. Physical therapists, occupational, speech, and they do a little bit of CNA work as well. The big difference between home health care and home care is home health care is skilled, it's much more acute, and oftentimes the reimbursement or the payment sources are different. Medicare in many skilled nursing agencies is a payment source through the federal government, but they're restricted to how much time they can spend if they're coming into a private residence in a person's home, because Medicare is concerned about how much time they're going to be there. So usually it's a 45-minute to a 1-hour visit, a couple times a week. In-home care, Medicare is not accepted. Federal government didn't allow that. So there are other payment sources, but we often work in conjunction with home health care because they kind of stop at an hour, and anything above and beyond that, we would come in with our caregiver. It could be for a couple hours a week, or it could be just for the weekend, or it could be long-term, or it could be round-the-clock care. And we provide care throughout about 10 counties in North Carolina and a couple in South Carolina as well. So the primary thing between the two companies is more acute level care. It's going to be home health care, and it's also versus non-acute, it's going to be home care, but it's also the payment sources that it takes. Home health care is going to be Medicare, third-party insurances, and some other options, whereas home care, it's more private pay, long-term care insurance, which pays actually 100% of home care, up to the maximum they allow per day, accidental insurance, workers' comp insurance. The VA pays for home care, which a lot of vets and their families don't know about. But the VA has two programs, aid and attendance and what they call home companion services, that will pay the home care company to provide care on the behalf of the vet or even a widow of a vet under certain circumstances.
Well, that sounds really very interesting, because I think most people think of just nurses and they don't realize that there's other things
Right.
that obviously as you get older you're going to need.
Right.
Maybe it's just help getting into the bathtub,
Yeah.
or something like that. Again, you've shared a little bit, but do you help? Does your company or companies like yours help people kind of understand all of these different
Yeah.
funding sources?
Yeah, oftentimes I'll get a phone call from a referral source or from the family members themselves directly, and they'll say, just like you asked, I have a mother, or I have a mother-in-law, or I have a spouse, or I have an aunt, or a grandfather, or grandmother, or whatever. Or in a rare occasion, it's I need help myself. But most of the times they're asking questions about a loved one. And they'll say, Mr. Koch, you're the owner of the company, you're in the industry for a while. I'm trying to get some sort of guidance on what to do and what options are available to me. Now, sometimes we have a conversation for a while via the phone, which is fine. And other times the families feel more comfortable if I literally come out and sit down with them. And oftentimes, quite honestly, we don't even provide care, which I'm almost giving counseling to give them other options that are available, even if that option is not my particular service. Because, you know, not to sound corny, but my wife and I are in this industry for many years now, and we didn't get into it, trust me, for purely the money. It was really to give back, and we were in a situation many years ago with my father-in-law that needed help, and we saw the need, not just for the individual that truly needed the care, but all the other family members that are worried about it or are helping to provide care. People always say, well, that's great that you help the person that needs care. Well, equally is the other family members, because what we often see in the business that I'm in are people that I'll get the call from the caregivers or a family member of the existing caregiver that sees the actual caregiver health being deteriorated or stress levels increase dramatically. In some rare occasions, they've actually been hospitalized, the caregiver, because they're overburdened with, not that they don't want to, but providing that extra care for their loved one, and it's too much for them. It's physically too much, or mentally it's very stressful and exhausting, and they can't handle it all. You know, oftentimes we get calls from daughters, you know, and they are trying to provide care for their parent or parents. They have a full family of their own, and in many cases they also have a job. And who can do all that? Nobody. Nobody. So what's worse is getting that extra help or literally physically deteriorating to a point where the caregiver can't provide care. So we as a home care agency come in to help give that extra freedom to the existing caregiver and the family around that individual that needs the care, but to free up time and to let the caregiver who's a family member be there as a family member, or for us to be a stopgap so that that caregiver can take a break and go out and have a dinner with her husband or with her grandchildren or whatever. It's important.
I expect a movie every so often to get
Exactly.
away. It would be very, very important.
Very, very important to get away.
But again, what I'm seeing here is that, and this has to do just personally between family members, oh, mom needs to go, we need to get her into a nursing home right now.
Right.
She's just not able to do this. And what I'm hearing is that there's a lot more that can be done to just, because my mom wants to stay in her own house.
Right, right. Yeah, a lot of people, I mean, let's face it, there's many options out there. We're very fortunate in the Charlotte community for having top-notch medical facilities, top-notch hospitals. I mean, people fly in to Charlotte for getting great care, but also retirement communities. I mean, and both existing ones that have been here for many years and new ones that are popping up, you know, really big, strong names in retirement communities. But the bottom line is many people prefer to stay at home for many different reasons. Not all people. And in fact, there's many clients that I've referred out because I truly thought that they needed other interaction. Even though they didn't think they did, I thought it might be a good idea. But oftentimes people say, well, I want to stay in my house because they have family members that are in their home with them that they don't want to leave. They have memories that if you take any individual and move them to another location, and those memories don't always go with them sometimes, or it's more difficult, whereas they can look in the next room and remember a Christmas that took place 4 years ago that meant a lot to them. Sure. Well, it's hard to take that with them if they go to a retirement community. And last but not least, and don't laugh, but pets. You know, oftentimes retirement communities don't allow pets. And as one who's myself, who have 3 kids, as your kids eventually leave the nest, those pets become more important in our lives, as they are throughout our lives, but especially as empty nesters and as seniors. And without being able to take a pet with you to a retirement community, in some cases, some retirement communities allow it, but it can be very devastating, and can cause, in some cases, depression.
Right. You were mentioning before that your company actually has these various different types of opportunities of service to individuals, including pet care and all. Again, one of the things that we were talking about in terms of these non-specialty cares, if you can just maybe give a little bit more examples of what those sort of things that aren't necessarily trained health care.
Right, non-skilled home care. So home care, oftentimes, some of the things that we do, kind of a checklist, when I go in and talk to a family and say, because they always say, well, what does your company do? And I've literally have it on the back of my business card now. And I'll flip it over and I'll say, well, here's a quick synopsis, not all of things, but a quick overview. Medication reminders, meal preparations, transportation, showering if and when needed, incontinent care, for those of you who don't know what that would be, that'd be if somebody can't use the restrooms by themselves, you know, a caregiver will help them do that. Showering, dressing, you know, a lot of meal preparation and cleanup afterwards, light housekeeping, which could be not full maid service, but light housekeeping, laundry, linen service. You know, a lot of people, you know, I find a lot in our industry and a lot dealing with seniors and family members, especially seniors, is they come out of a hospital, they come out of a rehab center, and you talk to them and they'll say, is everything okay? Yeah, everything's fine. Now, they might be in a wheelchair when you talk to them or have a broken leg, but in their mind, they're like, yeah, everything's fine. We, as people, normally think, well, yeah, everything's fine because I don't have any issues, right? It's typical to do that.
Sure.
Whereas your body might not be fine. And sometimes it can be a little bit of confusion, or you don't always see it right off the bat. But the reality of it is the most serious injuries that take place are the first couple of weeks out of discharge from a hospital or rehab center. And there's an old saying, they say, you know, I hear this a lot from seniors and their family members, but seniors, and they'll say, well, I'm saving my money for a rainy day, right? Well, if I get a call from a family member, guess what? It's usually raining outside, okay? It's time for that help. You know, we're not looking for, this is not about the money. This is about getting help for people that truly need help, short-term and in some cases long-term, but most of the times it's short-term help to get them through a transitionary time period where they can strengthen themselves and or with home health care companies and get back on their feet again where they're independent again. This is not, okay, once you start this, you're deteriorating for the rest of your life. On the contrary, we want them to get better and get more independent. In some cases, there are degenerative diseases where they do deteriorate over time, but that's not the norm. It's the abnormal of the cases.
Right. Well, again, you listed a whole slug of different services. How do people plug in? I mean, would they set up? Obviously, you start off with certain things, but maybe down the road you need to add on things. How easy is that?
It's very easy. You know, when we open, we call opening up a case. So let's say Mrs. Jones called and says, my mom needs help, and we need to start her right away. And I go out there that afternoon or the next day. It could be that fast. And I would personally, we're 9 years old, our company, and I open up 90% of the cases myself, because I find that families want to meet the owner themselves. They want to say, well, I've met the owner, I like him, I feel comfortable. Because let's face it, when you're talking about sending a complete stranger into somebody's home, it doesn't get much more personal than that. So they want to oftentimes meet the owner, talk to them, and feel comfortable with him or her before they pull the trigger on it. And I don't blame them. I would do the same thing. So I go out and meet the families. I prefer to do that anyway. Mm-hmm. And we do a case opening, and we have a checklist. And I'll say, would you like to tell me how your mother would like, what type of services would be needed? Or would you like me to go down the checklist and review the items that oftentimes people ask us about? And we'll go down the checklist, and they can say yay or nay on whether or not they want care. Like some people say, nope, I don't want someone doing my laundry service. I like doing my own laundries, and I like changing my own linens, or I'm capable of doing that myself. That's fine. Mm-hmm. And other people say, no, I cook my own meals. Most of the people say, well, am I paying that per hour, and is all part of it included? And I'll say, yes, well, I want the caregiver to do it. So it just depends. Sure. It really does depend on the wishes of the family. And they make up the hours, and they decide what specific services the caregivers are going to do while they're in that particular house. And most of the times it's on that sheet, but we always have extra room for things we didn't count on, you know. Sometimes it's walking, you know, a dog down a particular, some person, we have somebody right now who likes to go every Friday to lunch to a new restaurant with the caregiver. So every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday they get service. On Monday and Wednesday, the caregiver and the woman decides where they're going to go to lunch Friday. And this is very important to her. She wants to get out of the house. And that's not just the issue of getting out of the house, that's feeling her independence, getting her away. And she truly looks forward to it every single week.
Well, I would too. I know I would too. So anyway, but again, these are all things that I guess in my thinking, if I'm looking at it, I'm saying, oh gosh, this has got to be extremely expensive. I'm sure it's not cheap, but my suspicion is that our viewers might think that this is more expensive than they can possibly deal with.
It's really not that bad. I'll be glad to talk about it. Prices vary. Well, first of all, let me mention in home care, we don't take Medicare, and when I say we, I mean all home care agencies. Medicare is not allowed to be accepted by a licensed home care agency, at least in the state of North Carolina. I don't think it's anywhere in the nation. Mm-hmm. Third-party insurance, the same way. Now, private pay is the most common form of payment for home care, you know, which is cash or checks, you know. Also, long-term care insurance for those clients or people that are out there and you have long-term care insurance. And I always get the question, well, I might have long-term care insurance. Trust me, if you have long-term care insurance, you know it, because you're paying premiums anywhere from $200 to $1,000 a month. This is not some third-party insurance that you didn't realize you had. You're paying for it every month. You probably would know that you have it. So if you have it, and the big programs would be like, just some examples, Genworth and John Hancock and MetLife, Bankers Life, just some examples of long-term care insurance companies. It pays 100% of home care. That is, a caregiver going into individual retirement center or private residence and providing care, long-term care insurance, pays for that, 100%. There has to be an assessment up front by a third-party assessment group. That takes pretty quickly. And it's a double whammy, because if you utilize long-term care insurance to pay for the services that our company and companies like us provide, not only are you getting the services paid for by the long-term care policy, but you're not going to pay any premiums pretty much. I think I've yet to meet a long-term care insurance company that demands to have premiums continuously be paid if they're utilizing the policy to pay for the care itself. So it's a double whammy. You're not paying anymore because you're finally cashing in on the policy to be used for home care. And then also Medicaid, although a lot on the state level, a lot of the Medicaid programs have been cut back pretty dramatically, and VA, as we've talked about. Workers' comp, if you've ever been in workers' comp, if you fall under workers' comp or accidental insurance, believe it or not, home care pays for that, or those policies pay for home care as well. So.
Okay. Well, again, it's maybe more doable than you might think.
Yes. Oh, and sorry. On the private pay side, it is, in the Charlotte market, it's anywhere from $17 to about $21 per hour. Now, to put it in perspective, if you were to get a private duty nurse, and I'm not an expert, but from my last knowledge of people talking about it in the industry, if you truly would say, I want an RN to come to my house and I'm going to pay out of pocket for it, because anything past 45 minutes, you're going to have to pay out of pocket pretty much, it would start at $50 to $60 an hour. And the likelihood, more importantly, is, you know, people say, I need a nurse to come see my mother. 98% of the times, you really don't need a nurse unless it's an acute level care need. And trust me, if somebody's being discharged from a hospital or rehab center or sees their primary physician recently, they'll tell them the difference. Most of the time, a CNA level caregiver or a basic caregiver can provide that care, and a nurse is not needed.
Sure. Well, now I had a friend whose mother had some surgery on her eyes, and she hired an RN to come in, and I'm looking, of course it wasn't my position to say anything, but I'm looking and saying, well, she's just putting drops in somebody's eyes twice a day.
It was an RN?
Well, the RN was hired, but would that be something that we would need an RN, or could it be?
It depends.
Would this be something? Again, I don't know.
In the state of North Carolina, if medication cannot be dispensed by anybody less than an RN, to the best of my knowledge. So even my caregivers can't count out 60 milligrams and hand it to Mrs. Smith. But the way around that one that everybody chooses is Mrs. Smith's daughter comes in, or the husband or the neighbor counts out in a pill box all 7 days the medications, and then we pour it into the individual. The caregiver pours it into their hands, because we list out all the medications in details, when they need to be taken, what it's for. In fact, that's very important, because if an emergency happens, God forbid, oftentimes the very first thing an ambulance driver or paramedics will ask for is, I want a full list of medications. And for those viewers out there, if you don't already have a full list, an updated list of medicines you're taking, and at what times and what dosages, do it. Write it down, have it in a drawer, somewhere easily accessible, so that if an emergency does happen, that's the first thing they're going to ask about is medicines. So oftentimes, yeah, the CNAs or caregivers will help not dispense, that's the word here, not counting out 50 milligrams. They can't do that, but they will pour out the 50 milligrams already counted out into the individual's hands so that they can take it and make sure that medication adherence is kept up to date. That's one of the biggest reasons why people get readmitted back to hospitals, because they're not taking their medications properly.
Well, again, very important to understand and put in the back of your mind when you're dealing with your future health. So,
yeah.
Well, we've talked about a great deal, and I know we have a little bit of time left, so we're not right at the end yet. But
right.
I guess one of the things I see on the list is help with pediatric care.
Yeah, we do some. We have some provide care for certain children that need help temporarily, and some that are long term, like some autistic children we've dealt with, or sadly degenerative diseases. Let me also mention. As we partner with home health care companies, and when I say we, I mean my company, but many home care companies, we also partner up tremendously with hospice. So, it's not the greatest subject in the world, but it's reality. I think that there's a misnomer out there that people think, well, if my mother is passing away, they're going to call hospice. Hospice can come in and provide the help, but really they're calling us to come in to help. So.
Well, we've covered an awful lot of topics.
We did.
Grateful for this opportunity. I've learned a great deal, Phil, and we're so grateful that you've been able to be on the show. And for all of the people that are out there, you've been watching Aging with Attitude. I'm Keith Dennis. Be sure to tune in on the second and third Saturdays of each month for this information that's so important to our seniors. In the meantime, you all stay very, very well.